Hi everyone, my name is Maribel. Today we're going to be learning more about helicopters. We're going to talk about what they are, how they work, and then we're going to apply that knowledge to build our own helicopter. So, what is a helicopter? Have you ever seen one? How would you describe one? The thing with helicopters is that although it is a flying vehicle like an airplane, there's a big difference between an airplane and a helicopter. Do you know what that difference is? The biggest difference between a helicopter and an airplane are their wings. So if we look at a picture of an airplane, you notice that they have a pair of fixed wings, meaning that the wings don't move. They just sit at the side of the airplane's body. But a helicopter, we notice something very special about their wings. They have two pair of wings, one at the back, the tail wings, and one at the top, what we call the motor wings. And we're going to look at how they work to understand the helicopter a little more. So the wings that a helicopter has are located at the top of the body and at the back. And in order to get the helicopter to fly, they're going to rotate very, very quickly. So we're going to learn about how helicopters are able to fly. But first, let's look at all the parts that make up a helicopter. So if you were to build your own helicopter, what are some things you're going to need to have? Of course, you're going to need the two motor wings at the back and at the top. But what are some other parts that make up the helicopter? The first is you're going to need a cockpit. The cockpit is where the pilot is, where the people sit. You're also going to need a pair of landing skids, and that is at the bottom of the helicopter. Why do you think we need landing skids? Helicopters are not like airplanes. If you've ever been on an airplane, you know that airplanes need a long runway before they can lift off or descend back to the ground. But a helicopter doesn't need a runway. It can safely lift off and land back on the ground without the need for a runway, as long as you have the landing skids for the helicopter. So those are the four parts that make up the body of the helicopter: the motor wings, the tail wings, the cockpit, and the landing skids. So we're going to make sure that our model has all those parts on our helicopter. Now let's try to understand how a helicopter is able to fly. The most complicated part of the entire helicopter is all happening at the top motor wings. Now in order for the wings to work, you're going to need some kind of thing in order to get it to spin really quickly. So what are we going to have to need in order to get our wings to work? We're going to need a motor. The motor is what powers the entire helicopter to get it to fly. So in order for the helicopter to fly, the motor will be turned on and it'll power the wings. But what happens after that? So when the wings are spinning really quickly, they reduce the air pressure at the top of the wings. By reducing the air pressure at the top of the wings, we're able to create a force called lift. So if we want our helicopter to go up and raise into the sky, we're going to need to create this force lift. So they spin really quickly, they reduce air pressure at the top, and we're able to create the force of lift in order to bring up the helicopter. If the force of lift is greater than the weight of the helicopter, then the helicopter will raise into the air. If the force of lift equals the weight of the helicopter, then the helicopter will hover in the air, so it will stay in the same place. And if the weight is greater than the force of lift, then the helicopter will begin to descend back to the ground. So the pilot is in charge of controlling the force of lift inside the cockpit. So that is how a helicopter works. Now we know the parts that make up the helicopter, how they're able to fly, and now we're going to apply that knowledge to create our own helicopter. So we're going to get started on the build. Make sure you have all the pieces out in front of you, and let's get started. So for the first step, you're going to get your 5x11 frame. You're going to get 4 black pins, and you're going to want to put the black pins on the top 2 So for the first step, we're going to grab our 5x11 frame and grab 4 black pins, and we're going to place the black pins on the inside of the frame in the top 2 pinholes on each side. I find that the easiest way to do this is to grab a black pin, grab 2 fingers, put them so that they're both in the inside of the frame, and then just push inwards. So I put 2 at the top pinholes, and you'll do the same on the other side. Once you've done that, grab 2 T-beams, and you're going to connect it so that both black pins go onto the outermost pinholes. So you're going to clip 1 T-beam on each side, like that, and do the same on the other end. Make sure they're all the way clipped in. And now you're going to take 2 axles of size 9 and 2 cross blocks of size 3. Take 1 axle, 1 cross block, put it through the cross hole, and then put 2 black pins on each of the pinholes. And you're going to create 1 more piece of this. So you're going to do that again. Axle 9, cross hole, size 3 cross block, and 2 black pins. And now we're going to attach the black pins onto our T-beams. So you're going to insert that inside, and you want to make sure that the cross blocks are on the outside of the frame. So you're not connecting it inside, you're just putting it on the outside and connecting them to the T-beam. So once you've added in the 2 cross blocks, You're going to put that aside, and now we're going to grab 2 beams of size 7, and you're going to put black pins on each end of the beams. So you'll do that for 2 beams of size 7. And you're going to connect it on the side of the frame. So there should be 1 pinhole free from the top. So notice how it's on the same side as the T-beams. So once you've stuck that onto the side, we're going to now take a T-beam, put 2 black pins on the outer pinholes, take a beam of size 13 and 2 blue Technic pin with ridges. Insert the blue pins onto the side of the frame. So you're putting it on the side where you have 2 pinholes. You're going to insert it so that the longer side goes in. So now you can attach your size 13 beam. So it goes right at the very end. And now, taking a beam of size 7, you're going to put a black pin in the 3rd pinhole from the top. So 1, 2, 3. And then on the 2nd pinhole from the bottom. So 1, 2. And now you're able to clip your size 7 beam on the inside of the frame, and you want to make sure that the beam is touching the frame. So you might have to flip the beam over if you notice that you clipped it in and there's space. So make sure that it's all the way at the front. Now grabbing your T-beam, you're going to place so that you have the 2 pins going in right next to your size 7 beam. And you want to make sure that the bottom of the T is sticking down towards the table on the same direction as you have your other T-beams. So far we're creating the base of the helicopter. And you remember what these part of the helicopters are? Those are the landing skids that we talked about. So we have our landing skids, and now we're creating the tail of our helicopter, and then we're going to move on and create the rest of our build. So take a 3x5 angular beam, put 2 black pins on the top 2 pinholes on the longest side, and you're going to clip that in so that the L shape, the shortest end, is facing towards the sky, and there's 1 pinhole separating the T-beam and the angular beam. So now you're going to take your other beam of size 13, and you're going to put a black pin in the 5th pinhole from the bottom. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Put a black pin in. And you're going to now place your beam onto the last available space inside the frame. And you want the black pin to go into the middle pinhole of your T-beam. So you're just going to clip that in, slide it along. And now taking 2 blue Technic pin with ridges, just like on the other side, you're going to secure all your beams together by inserting the pins into the 2 pinholes. So at this step, just make sure you have everything in the right location so that you have your angular beam facing up, your T-beams facing down. And now you're going to take 2 beams of size 3 and clip them on to the side of your helicopter so that the bottom of the beam is right next to your size 7 beam from the beginning. And now we're going to build the tail wings. So to build the tail wings, take a 3-spoke angular block, put pointers on each spoke, and you're going to be facing them all so that they're pointed in different directions. Take a tan Technic pin with axle, insert the axle into the cross hole, and now we can attach the pin into the tail of our helicopter, and now you can see that we have the tail wings of the helicopter. So we have the landing skids, the tail, and now the only 2 things missing are the cockpit and, of course, the motor wings. So once you've connected that on and everything looks good, for the next step we're going to start building the cockpit. So take 2 5x7 frames, put 2 black pins on the bottom 2 pinholes, and do that for both frames. And now you're going to stick them on to the size 7 beam on the side. Making sure that they're faced upwards in the opposite direction as the skids. Now taking 2 beams of size 9, you're going to put a black pin on each end. So using 4 black pins for these 2 pieces. And now you're going to stick them onto the side of the frame, both at the front. So clip one in to the bottom pinholes at the front of the helicopter, and then at the back. And now, taking your double angular beams, you're going to put black pins in the first pinhole on the longest side, and then in the second pinhole right before the joint. So you have 1 pinhole before you curve in on the angular beam. So there should be 3 empty pinholes separating the 2 black pins. And you're going to clip that onto the second line of the frame. So it's right in the middle of the frame. And clip that in so that you have the shortest end of the angular beam facing towards the front of your helicopter. And you're going to do the same for your other angular beam, making sure that you point the black pins in the right direction. And clip that on to the frame. So the double angular beams are on the insides, and the shortest end curves towards the front of the helicopter. And now, taking an axle 7, put it through a 3x2 cross block through the cross hole, and you're going to join the 2 double beams together by placing the axle through each cross hole. Once it's inside both of the double angular beams, just make sure that your beams have not come off the frame. So just clip them in, and you might have to separate them out a bit if it doesn't look like they're all secured. And then, taking 2 axles of size 3, we're going to stick 4x4 angular beams onto the other cross hole of each double angular beam, and they're going to go on the outside. So you're going to put an axle 3 through 1 cross hole, and then stick them on to the outside of the helicopter. And you'll do the same for the other side. So for the next step, you're going to take 4 beams of size 9 and put a black pin on each end. So you're going to use 2 black pins for each beam, and do this for all 4 of your beams. Take 2 beams and connect them across the 2 frames on the outer pinholes. So you're going to avoid the middle pinhole at the top of the frame. So you only have 2 at the top. And then you're going to take the other 2 and you're going to put it right along the top pinholes on the side, at the back and at the front. So I put it at the front. Now I'm going to put it at the back. Now taking a beam of size 3, you're going to place a tan Technic pin with axle, put the pin side into the middle pinhole, turn the beam over, and put 2 black pins on each end of the outer pinholes. So now you're going to insert that beam with the pin sides going into the size 9 beams, and it's going to go right in the middle. So that should be the 5th pinhole from either end. So it's right in the center of our helicopter. So you can see at this stage we have the landing skids, we have the back wings, we have our cockpit, and of course the last step is to do the motor wings. So that are the wings at the top of the helicopter. So to make that, you're going to take a 3-spoke angular block, put axle extenders on each spoke. So using 3 axle extenders across. And then put axle number 7 through each cross hole of each axle extender. And lastly, just insert that into the tan Technic pin. And we've completed our helicopter. So let's look at the parts that we've covered, and let's look at how our helicopter resembles a real helicopter. So to make a helicopter, you're going to need to have the back wings and the front wings in order to spin really quickly using a motor. In order to fly, they'll spin, they'll reduce the air pressure at the top of the helicopter, which will then allow us to create the force called lift, which helps us to descend and ascend the helicopter. We don't need a runway for a helicopter. All you need are the landing skids. And to control the force of lift and to pilot the helicopter, you're going to need a cockpit for people to go in. So that's everything for today's build. We've covered what helicopters are, how they fly, how to make our own helicopter. Can you think of the uses for a helicopter? They're used all over the world in many different settings, and we use them a lot for air rescue and military operations. So we've learned everything about the helicopter today. Once you're done with the build, make sure to put all your pieces away, and we'll see you for the next build. Bye everyone.